The key still hung on the same chain as his dog tags, warm from 2 years against his chest, and it didn't turn. Travis Reed stood on his own front porch with a duffel at his feet and worked the key a second time. Slower. The way you double-check a thing your body already understands and your mind hasn't caught up to yet. The teeth wouldn't seat. The lock was new, brighter than the old brass, a different brand entirely. He pressed his forehead to the door for a second and breathed in the smell of the porch he built with his own hands. Cut cedar and old paint. And then the deadbolt clicked from the inside, and the door opened 6 inches on a chain he'd never installed. A young woman looked out at him. She was maybe 25, dark-haired, one hand resting on the round curve of a pregnant belly, and behind her he could see his living room, wearing someone else's furniture. She was afraid of him, and he understood that. A big man in a dusty uniform on a strange porch at dusk. So he stepped back and made his voice easy. "I'm sorry to scare you," he said. "My name's Travis Reed. This is my house." The woman's face did something complicated. "You're the brother," she said. "Shane's brother. The soldier." Travis felt the first cold finger of it then, low in his stomach. The same feeling he'd learned to trust downrange. The one that said the ground under your boots is not what the map promised. "Yeah," he said. "I'm the soldier. Can you tell me why you're in my house?" "We rent it," she said. "From Shane. We've lived here since the fall. I'm Rosa." And then, more quietly, because some part of her was already doing the same math he was, he said it was his. To understand how a man comes home to a locked door on a house he owns free and almost clear, you have to understand what he left behind and who he trusted to keep it. Travis was 29. He'd grown up in a small town off the highway west of Fayetteville, North Carolina. The kind of town that was mostly a water tower, a Dollar General, 3 churches, and a diner where the same 12 trucks parked every morning. Their mother had died when Travis was 11 and Shane was 14, and their father had raised them hard and decent, and then dropped dead of a heart attack in the feed store when Travis was 22. And after that, it was just the two of them. Travis and Shane, the whole of the family either of them had left. There was a thing their father had said near the end that Travis carried like a stone in his pocket. The old man had grabbed both their wrists in the feed store parking lot one cold morning, months before the heart attack took him right there in that same store, and made them promise the only thing he ever really asked. Look out for each other. You're all you've got. Blood shows up. Travis had believed it all the way down. He built his whole idea of the world on it. He was going to learn that a promise is only as strong as the weaker of the 2 men who make it, and that some men swear blood shows up. Right up until the morning, blood signs your name to a lie. Travis had joined the Army at 18 because it was a paycheck and a way out and, if he was honest, a way to be useful. He was good at it. He was steady the way some men are tall, without trying. And steadiness is worth more in a war than almost anything else. He'd done one deployment, come back, re-enlisted, and somewhere in there he'd done the thing his father would have been proud of. He'd bought a house. It was nothing fancy, a 3-bedroom ranch on Pine Street with a carport and a good roof and a yard where a dog could run. He put down what he'd saved and taken a small mortgage, and then, being who he was, he'd thrown every spare dollar at that loan for years, until he owed less than $30,000 on a place worth 8 times that. The deed had his name on it, and no one else's. On the nights the desert got cold and the sky got huge, he'd think about that little house with the porch light on, and it was the thought that carried him. Shane was 3 years older and had gone the other way. Where Travis was quiet, Shane was loud and easy and funny, the brother who could talk his way into a party and out of a ticket. He tried a dozen things: a landscaping business, a food truck, a stretch selling cars, and none of them had quite stuck. And there was always a reason, and the reason was never Shane. Travis loved him the uncomplicated way. You loved the person who taught you to ride a bike. He knew Shane was a mess with money. It never once occurred to him that Shane was dangerous. So when the orders came for back-to-back deployments, a 9-month tour, and then, before he could even get home, another 11 overseas, Travis did what soldiers do before they leave. He went to the base legal office, the free one, where they'll draw up a will and a power of attorney for you while you wait. And he named the only family he had. He gave Shane a durable power of attorney. He signed it in front of a legal assistance attorney, and he understood exactly what it was. A document that let his brother pay his bills and mind his house while he was on the other side of the planet with no reliable way to wire money or sign a check. He set the mortgage and the utilities to draw from his checking account. He left Shane a key. "Just keep the lights on and the grass cut," Travis had told him on the phone the night before he flew out. "Anything comes up with the house, handle it. I trust you, man." "I got you," Shane had said. "Go do your thing. It'll all be here when you get back." Here is the thing Travis didn't know. The thing he'd spend months reconstructing later, from bank statements and timestamps laid out on a card table under a bare bulb. Shane had a problem, and it lived on his phone. Sometime in the last couple of years, the sports betting apps had come to North Carolina, bright and legal and always open. And Shane, who could never let a sure thing go, had found the one machine perfectly built to eat a man like him. It started small, 20 here, 100 there, a good weekend that felt like proof. Then a bad one. Then the chase, which is the part that kills you. The certainty that the next one squares it all up. By the time Travis's plane lifted off, Shane was already underwater and sinking, and sitting in his pocket was a legal document that let him touch his little brother's money. He told himself it was a loan. Travis would understand. Travis was overseas making combat pay with nothing to spend it on. And Shane was drowning. And he'd put it all back before Travis ever landed, every dime, and no one would ever have to know. That is the story a man tells himself the first time. It is never the story by the end. The first transfer was for $800 out of Travis's savings and into Shane's own account. And the sky did not fall. So there was another. Then he stopped moving it in pieces and started moving it in chunks. He told himself he was managing it. What he was doing was feeding it. There was one night Travis would later piece together from the timestamps when Shane lost $9,000 in about 4 hours chasing a single bad bet, and then moved $11,000 of his brother's savings before sunrise to cover the hole it tore. Travis could find the exact minute it happened on the statement. A Saturday, very late, the way you can find the moment a fault line slips. He used to wonder what his brother had been feeling in that minute, whether he'd still called it a loan, whether he'd believed it. He decided eventually that it didn't matter. The number was the number, either way. Over the first deployment, he drained most of the savings, a little over $60,000 that Travis had put away one hard tour at a time. When Travis, half a world away and starved for home, texted to ask how things were, Shane sent back a photo of the mowed lawn and a thumbs up and the words, "All good, bro." Once Travis asked, offhand, about the savings account, and Shane sent a screenshot of a balance. Travis didn't know you could stage a screenshot. He looked at it on a cot in the dark and felt lucky, and went back to work. When Travis got a 2-week window between deployments and talked about flying home, Shane talked him out of it. "Don't waste it here, man. Nothing to do. Go somewhere with a beach. You earned it." Travis, who trusted him, spent his leave with a buddy in another state and never saw his own street. He thought his brother was being generous. His brother was buying time. Because by then, the house had become part of it. With the savings gone and the betting still hungry, Shane needed the house to keep paying. So he did the thing that turns a debt into a crime. He listed Travis's home for rent, furnished it with his own cast-offs, and rented it to a young couple who answered the ad, Rosa and her husband Miguel. A shy pair expecting their first baby, glad to find a clean 3-bedroom they could afford. Shane signed the lease as the owner. He took first month, last month, and a deposit in cash and by transfer. And he pointed all of it at his own account. $1,600 a month, month after month. Rent on a house he did not own. Collected from good people who had no idea. And still it wasn't enough, because it never is. So Shane reached for the last thing. He wanted the house itself. Not to live in, to borrow against, to sell if it came to that. To turn the biggest thing his brother owned into cash he could throw down the same hole. A power of attorney would not let him give himself his brother's house, and he knew it. And he didn't want a paper trail that said Shane Reed as attorney in fact either. So he did something simpler and far worse. He forged it. He drew up a quitclaim deed, the kind of one-page form that signs a house from one person to another, transferring the Pine Street house from Travis Reed to Shane Reed. Where his brother's signature belonged, someone signed Travis's name. Then a man walked into a little notary and tax shop across the county line, showed a driver's license, said he was Travis Reed, and swore the signature was his. The notary, a careful older woman named Barbara who kept a neat logbook out of habit no law required, stamped it and wrote it down. And Shane took that deed to the county register of deeds and recorded it. And just like that, on paper, in the public record, the house belonged to Shane. The trouble was the date. The deed swore that Travis Reed had personally appeared and signed on a Tuesday in February. On that Tuesday in February, Travis Reed had been 8,000 miles away in a tan-colored building with sand in his teeth, standing a shift he could prove down to the minute. A man cannot be in two places. That single impossible date was the thread that would unravel all of it. But Travis didn't know any of that yet. Travis was still on his own porch, looking through a 6-inch gap at a frightened, pregnant woman in his living room, feeling the floor of his life tilt. Rosa let him in. That was the first kindness, and he never forgot it. She could have shut the door on a stranger, but something in his face told her the truth was on his side, and she unhooked the chain and let him stand in his own hallway while the light went blue outside. Miguel came home from his shift and found a soldier sitting at their kitchen table. And the three of them put their papers side by side, and the picture assembled itself the way a bad picture does, all at once. They showed him the lease. There was Shane's name on the owner's line, Shane's phone number, the address of Shane's apartment for the security deposit. They showed him the account they sent rent to every month. Travis looked at it for a long time and did not say anything. And Rosa would tell people later that the quiet was the part that scared her. That she'd expected a man to shout, and instead watched one go very, very still. Rosa was scared for more than the stranger on her porch. She and Miguel had handed a man they believed was their landlord every dollar they'd saved, first month and last, and a deposit, and signed a lease that Travis now understood was worth exactly nothing. Because you cannot rent out a house you do not own. They were a pregnant woman and a warehouse worker who had done everything right, and through no fault of their own, they were living in the middle of a crime. Travis read all of that off their faces across the kitchen table, and strangely, it steadied him. His anger was his own business. Their fear was something he could actually do something about. He didn't yell. He'd learned a long time ago that yelling is what you do when you've already lost control of a situation. And he did not intend to lose control of this one. He asked Rosa if he could take a photo of the lease. He asked Miguel where exactly they'd found the listing. He wrote down the account number the rent went to. Then he thanked them, told them honestly that he didn't know yet what any of it meant for them, but that none of it was their fault, and he would not be putting a pregnant woman out on the street. And he picked up his duffel and walked back into the dark. On the way out of the neighborhood, he stopped at the gas station on the county road, the one with the flickering sign he'd filled up at 1,000 times. And his card was declined. He tried it twice. He tried a second card. He stood there under the buzzing lights while the clerk gave him the practiced pity you give a man whose card won't work. And some cold arithmetic in the back of his mind was already telling him why. He had $41 in cash and a combat deployment's worth of pay that was supposed to be sitting in a savings account, and he was starting to understand that it wasn't. He paid cash for the gas and a black coffee and didn't let his hand shake until he was back in the truck. 2 years of hard money. He didn't know the number yet. He'd know it soon, down to the dollar. He drove to the only other door he trusted, across the street and 2 houses down, where the porch light was on because it was always on. Walt Hendricks was 71, a widower, a Vietnam veteran with a bad knee and a good memory. The kind of old neighbor who notices every car that turns onto a street that only has 11 houses. He'd known Travis since Travis was a boy on a bike, and when he opened the door and saw the uniform and the face, he didn't ask a single question. He just said, "Come on in, son. I wondered when you'd get home. And I've been wanting to tell somebody what I've been watching." Walt made coffee and talked for 2 hours. He'd seen the moving truck the day the young couple came. He'd seen Shane's truck at the house at odd hours. Seen him carry Travis's tools out to it. Seen him show the place to strangers with a clipboard, like a landlord. He'd tried to call Travis and never gotten through the way you don't get through to a man at war. He'd kept a little of it in his head because that's what old soldiers do. They keep watch. "I didn't know what was legal and what wasn't," Walt said. "But I knew it was wrong. A man doesn't rent out his brother's house while his brother's overseas. That's not a thing a decent man does." That night Travis slept on Walt's couch under a quilt Walt's wife had made, and he did not sleep much. And somewhere around 3 in the morning, he made a decision that would shape everything after. He was not going to fight this with his fists, or his voice, or his grief. He was going to fight it the way you win a war you can't win with force. He was going to fight it with paper. It made the kind of sense to him that civilians never quite got. Overseas, you don't fix the big unfair thing by wanting to. You fix it by doing the small, correct thing, and then the next small, correct thing, in order, under pressure, while everything in you screams to do something loud instead. Travis had 2 years of practice at exactly that. Grief was loud. Rage was loud. Paperwork was quiet, and quiet was where he lived now. He would run his own ruin like a mission, and a mission has phases, and the first phase is always the same. You find out precisely what is true. In the morning, he did 3 things before he let himself feel anything. He called the bank the second it opened and told them in a flat and reasonable voice that he was home from deployment and needed a full accounting of every transaction on his accounts for the past 2 years, and that effective immediately, the power of attorney he'd granted was revoked. Then he drove to the base, to the same legal assistance office where he'd signed that power of attorney 2 years and a lifetime ago, and he sat across from a young judge advocate named Captain Ruiz and laid out the little he knew. Captain Ruiz listened without interrupting, which Travis appreciated. And then she told him some things that changed the shape of the day. She told him that revoking the power of attorney was right, and to do it in writing and record it, so his brother could never sign another thing in his name. She told him the base could help him with a lot of it for free. The letters, the affidavits about his deployment dates, the sworn statements from his command that would put him overseas on any date they needed. But she told him that clearing a fraudulent deed off a house and suing to get his money back was a fight in state court, and for that he wanted a civilian attorney who lived and breathed real estate and fraud. She gave him 2 names and made him promise to call one that afternoon. It was a strange thing sitting in that same office. 2 years back, he'd signed the power of attorney in a chair just like the one he was in now. A nervous kid about to fly out, checking a box he'd been told everybody checks. The document that was ruining him had been born in this building, in this quiet, fluorescent, well-meaning room. Captain Ruiz had a clerk pull his deployment orders and his pay records and start the sworn statements that would put him overseas on any date the case might need, and it cost him nothing but the time to sign his name, his real name, in his own real hand. The army had handed his brother the rope. Now, without any fuss, it handed Travis the ladder. There was one more thing she told him, and it was the thing he held on to. "You served," she said. "There are laws that protect a service member from getting quietly ruined while he's deployed. The Service Members Civil Relief Act tolls certain clocks while you're in uniform, so nobody gets to run out a deadline on you while you're gone. You didn't lose time by serving. If anything, the fact that this happened while you were deployed makes it worse for the man who did it, not for you. Go get your house back." He called the first name on the list from the parking lot. Her name was Diane Foster, and she'd been suing con men and clearing bad title in that county for 22 years. And she agreed to see him the next morning. Travis spent that night at Walt's kitchen table with a legal pad, writing down everything he could remember in order: dates and amounts and names. Because Captain Ruiz had told him that the person who remembers first and writes it down wins, and the person who improvises loses. The next morning, he found out how right she was. Diane Foster's office was small and smelled like old paper and good coffee, and she didn't waste his time with sympathy. She had him tell it once, all the way through, and she took notes in a fast, hard hand. And when he was done, she leaned back and said, "All right, here's what I need you to understand, because it's going to make the next few months bearable. Your brother didn't just take from you. He made a series of mistakes that are going to hang him. And the biggest one is the deed." Then she sent him to the Register of Deeds to get a certified copy of it, and that is where Travis Reed stood, in the exact middle of the worst month of his life, and looked at the thing that turned him from a victim into a threat. The Register of Deeds was a quiet county office with a long counter and a bored clerk, and the low hum of a building where nothing exciting ever happens. Travis gave the clerk his name and the address on Pine Street and asked for the deed. And the clerk typed and clicked, and after a minute the printer behind her began to grind out pages. She slid them across the counter, still warm, and Travis looked down at a quitclaim deed that gave his house to his brother. And at the bottom of it, he saw his own name written in a hand that was not his. He knew his own signature the way you know your own face. This wasn't it. The T was wrong. The loop of the S was wrong. It was a careful, slow forgery by a man who'd seen the real thing 100 times and still couldn't quite make his hand into his brother's hand. And there was the date, that Tuesday in February. The day Travis could prove, with pay records and a duty roster and the sworn word of his platoon sergeant, that he had been on the other side of the earth. He stood there, with his forged name warm in his fingers, and felt something turn over in his chest and settle, cold and clear and almost calm. He didn't yell. He didn't crumple it. He said, "Can I get 2 more certified copies of this?" And he paid the small fee, and he asked the clerk, politely, whether the office kept a record of who had recorded a document and when. And she said, "Of course, it's all public," and printed that too. Then he walked out to his truck and sat in the parking lot and started a folder. It was a plain manila folder he'd bought at the dollar store on the way over, and it would take 4 months to fill, and the last page that ever went into it would be a court order. But that afternoon it held 3 things: the forged deed, the recording record, and a legal pad page in his own true handwriting. And Travis understood, sitting there in the heat with the engine ticking, that the folder was going to be the weapon. Not his anger, the folder. He called Diane from the parking lot with the certified copies warm on the seat beside him. He didn't editorialize. He read her the name of the person giving the house away, and the name of the person getting it, and the date it was supposedly signed. And there was a pause on the line. And then she said, very quietly, "He put it in writing, Travis. He signed your name and drove it to the county and put it in the public record. Do you understand what that hands us? We don't have to prove what he did. He proved it himself, and then he filed it." Travis looked through the windshield at the ordinary afternoon, the county building, the flag hanging limp, a woman loading groceries into a minivan, and felt the mission drop into its next phase. "Then let's use it," he said. Because a forged deed is a special kind of nothing. Diane Foster had explained it that morning, and it was the sentence he repeated to himself, like a cadence, for the rest of that summer. A deed obtained by a lie can sometimes be undone, but a forged deed, a deed where the signature simply isn't yours, is void from the very beginning. It transfers nothing. Not to Shane, not to a bank Shane might have borrowed against it, not to a buyer Shane might have sold it to. In the eyes of the law, it never happened at all. The house had never stopped being Travis's, not for one single day. The county's paperwork was simply wrong, and paperwork can be corrected. The tool for correcting it, she said, was a lawsuit called a quiet title action, an old and unglamorous kind of case whose entire purpose is to make a court look at a cloud on a property's ownership and blow it away, to declare in a signed order exactly who owns a thing. And the first thing they would do, the very first day they filed, was record a notice on the property called a lis pendens, a flag in the public record that said, "This house is in litigation." so that Shane could not sell it or borrow another dime against it while the case was alive. They were going to freeze him. Travis went back to Diane's office the next week with the folder thicker, and they built it out together like a case, which is what it was. She sent formal letters. She subpoenaed the bank. And when the bank records came, 2 years of them, Travis spread them across her conference table, and they read the whole slow story of his ruin in black and white. And it was, in a terrible way, a relief to finally see it. They read it over a weekend at Walt's kitchen table, Travis and a paralegal from Diane's office, and Walt refilling coffee no one had asked for. 2 years of statements laid end to end down the length of the table and off the edge onto a chair. Travis worked through it line by line the way he'd been taught to clear a building. Slow, methodical, missing nothing. And he built a smaller folder inside the big one. A page for the savings, a page for the rent, a page for the betting. Every transfer numbered and dated and tied to the account it landed in. By Sunday night, he could have recited it in his sleep. He never once raised his voice. He just kept writing it down. There it was, the first $800. There was the ramp of it, small transfers becoming large ones, all of them landing in the same account. Shane's account, the one on Rose's lease. There were the betting charges in between, the app name over and over, a man throwing his brother's savings into a fire. There were the rent deposits coming in, $1,600 a month, the young couple's money flowing into the same account and out again the same week. You could watch the addiction breathe on the page, and you could see, plain as a signature, that not $1 of it had ever been spent on Travis or Travis's house. It had all gone to Shane. That was the part that mattered legally, Diane said, and she was almost cheerful about it. A power of attorney makes your brother your agent, and an agent has what the law calls a fiduciary duty, the highest duty there is, to act only in your interest and never his own. Every one of these transfers was a breach of that duty, self-dealing, as clean as she'd ever seen it. The power of attorney wasn't Shane's shield. It was the rope he'd tied himself with, because it proved he'd owed Travis a duty and stomped on it every single day for 2 years. Around then, Shane figured out that his brother was home. He called 11 times in one evening. Travis watched the phone light up on Walt's counter and did not answer, because Diane had told him not to. Told him that anything he said in anger, Shane could twist. And anything Shane said, Travis wanted in writing, not on a call. So Travis let it ring, and the texts started. And they moved through the whole ugly grammar of a cornered man in about 2 hours. First, the warmth. "Bro, you're home. We gotta talk. I can explain everything." Then, when that got silence, the minimizing. "It's not what it looks like. I was going to put it all back." Then the guilt, aimed like a weapon. "You'd really do this to your own brother? Over money? Mom would be ashamed of you." And finally, when even that hit the wall of Travis's silence, the fear, naked at last. "Please, please just call me. I'm in trouble, Trav." Travis read every one and answered none of them, and saved them all, because a screenshot is a kind of paper too, and he was collecting paper now. He would tell Walt, quietly, over coffee, that the hardest thing he'd ever done was not text back the words, "I loved you, man." He grieved his brother that summer like a death, because in every way that counted, it was one. But he did not let his grief drive the truck. The folder drove the truck. Shane came in person once. Travis was under the hood of Walt's old sedan on a Sunday when his brother's truck eased up to the curb, and Shane got out with his hands already spread, doing the walk, the easy grin gone soft and pleading. He looked thinner than Travis remembered, hollowed out, and for one dangerous second, Travis felt the old pull. The boy who'd run alongside his bike, holding the seat. Then Shane started talking, fast and warm. "We're brothers. We can fix this ourselves. No lawyers, no cops. I'll get you every dime back, I swear." And under it, Travis heard the old sound. A man trying to talk his way out of a ticket one more time. Travis wiped his hands on a shop rag and looked at him for a long moment. He didn't yell. He said, quietly, "You forged my name, Shane. You rented my house out while I was overseas. There's nothing left to fix between us. Talk to my lawyer." He held out Diane's business card, which he'd started carrying for exactly this, and when Shane wouldn't take it, he set it on the hood and went back to the engine. Shane stood on the curb and called him cold, said no house on earth was worth a brother, said a lot of things. Travis let every word go past him like weather. When the truck finally pulled away, Walt came out with 2 glasses of iced tea and didn't say a thing, just handed one over, and they drank them while the street went quiet again. Travis had nothing left to say to his brother, and for the first time that summer, that felt like strength instead of loss. There was a night in the middle of it when it nearly broke him, and it's worth telling because it's the truest part. Rosa went into early labor, 6 weeks ahead, and Miguel called the only other number he had, which was Travis, because Shane had stopped answering everyone the day the money ran out. Travis drove them to the hospital at 90 miles an hour and sat in a waiting room until nearly dawn. A soldier and a scared young husband passing a vending machine coffee back and forth. And when the nurse came out and said mother and baby were fine, a healthy girl, Travis felt something come loose in his chest that the fraud had welded shut. He held that baby the next afternoon, 5 pounds and furious at the world, and he thought, this is what a house is for. Not equity. This. He decided in that waiting room that whatever happened with the deed, that family had a home as long as he had one. And he told them so, and Rosa cried. And that was the moment Travis stopped being a man who'd been robbed and became a man with something to protect. He kept building. Diane pulled the notary's logbook, and there it was in Barbara's careful hand, the entry for that February Tuesday. A man who signed as Travis Reed and showed a license. Barbara, when Diane's investigator sat down with her, went pale and cooperative all at once. Because she'd been fooled, and she knew it, and she wanted no part of protecting the man who'd fooled her. The person in her book was not Travis. The description didn't match. Somebody had walked in wearing Travis's name like a borrowed coat. And Barbara's honest little logbook, kept for no reason but habit, became one more nail. A forensic document examiner compared the deed signature to a dozen of Travis's real ones, his enlistment papers, his true power of attorney, the closing documents from when he'd bought the house, and wrote a clean report. The signature on the deed was not written by the same hand. It was, in the flat language of experts, a simulation. By late summer, the folder was full, and Diane filed. She filed the quiet title action to void the forged deed and put the house back in Travis's name, where it had never actually stopped being. She recorded the list pendants the same hour, and the freeze slammed shut on Shane like a cell door. She filed a second suit alongside it, a civil complaint against Shane for breach of fiduciary duty, for conversion of the savings and the rent, for fraud, demanding a full accounting and a money judgment for every dollar. And she walked a copy of the whole thing, the deed, the bank records, the notary's book, the examiner's report, the affidavits from Travis's command, across the street to the district attorney's office. Because forging a deed and recording it is not just a wrong between brothers. It is a crime against the state. That was the sentence that finally let Travis breathe. Diane said it to him across the conference table on the day they filed, and he wrote it in the folder in his own hand so he could look at it. "The forged signature isn't your problem anymore," she said. "It's the state's. You didn't sign it, so it can't hurt you. But someone made it, and making it is a felony, and that someone is going to have to answer to a prosecutor, not to you. Your job was to bring the truth. You brought it. Now the system does the rest." What Shane didn't know in those weeks was that the freeze had already closed on him. When he finally went to do the very thing he'd forged the deed to do, walked into a lender to pull cash out of the house he thought was his, the loan officer ran the title and found the Liz Pendens sitting on the property like a hand laid flat on a shoulder. The house was in litigation. Nobody would lend $1 against it. Nobody would buy it. Somewhere across town, without a shout, without so much as a phone call, Travis had reached in through the county's own paperwork and lifted the keys right out of his brother's hand. Shane called the house again that night. Travis didn't pick up. He didn't need to anymore. The system did the rest. Slowly, the way it does, in a series of quiet rooms with bad lighting. And Travis showed up to every one of them in a clean shirt with his folder under his arm. The quiet title case barely even fought. There is not much a man can say when a court is holding a document that swears he appeared in a county in North Carolina on a day the United States Army can prove he was overseas. Shane's court-appointed lawyer asked for time, and the Service Members Civil Relief Act clock that Captain Ruiz had promised meant no deadline had run out on Travis while he served, so there was nothing to hide behind. The judge read the file. She looked at the forged deed and the real signatures side by side, and the sworn dates, and she signed an order declaring the quitclaim deed void from its creation, a legal nothing, and confirming that Travis Reed was, and had always been, the sole owner of the house on Pine Street. The clerk recorded the order over the top of the forgery, and the public record told the truth again. Travis drove to the Register of Deeds and bought one more certified copy, the order this time, and it went into the folder as the last page, the way Diane had told him at the very beginning that it would. The money case took longer, because money always does, but it moved in one direction only. Shane had no defense to a fiduciary breach documented to the dollar, and his own lawyer told him so. Rather than stand up in front of a jury and explain the betting app, he agreed to a judgment for the full amount, the drained savings and the stolen rent and the fees, a little over $90,000 with Travis's name on the collecting end of it. A judgment is a piece of paper too, but it is a piece of paper with teeth. It became a lien. When Shane's shiny truck sold, the money came off the top and went to Travis. His wages, the ones he earned at the job he took when the betting money finally ran out, were garnished. A slice of every check for years to come. Quiet and automatic and impossible to argue with. And the criminal case, the state's case, ground forward without Travis having to push it, exactly as Diane had promised. The district attorney charged Shane with forgery and with uttering a forged instrument, the crime of passing off a fake as real. and with obtaining property by false pretenses for the rent he'd collected on a house he didn't own. Faced with a notary's logbook and a document examiner and his own brother's flawless paper trail, Shane did the only thing left to a cornered man with no cards. He pleaded guilty. He stood in a courtroom in the town where they'd grown up and admitted, out loud, on the record, that he had forged his brother's name to steal his brother's home. The judge gave him time, suspended most of it on the condition he keep paying, and ordered criminal restitution on top of the civil judgment, so that the debt would follow him whether he had a job or not, whether he ran or not, for as long as it took. The imposter who'd walked into Barbara's shop wearing Travis's name became the state's problem too. Another loose thread the district attorney's office pulled. And Barbara, the honest notary who'd been fooled, kept her commission and kept her habit of writing everything down. And if anything, wrote it down more carefully now. Her little logbook had helped put a fraud away. She was quietly proud of that. Travis stood in the back of the courtroom the day his brother pleaded guilty, and he did not smile, and he did not weep. And when it was over, he walked out into the parking lot and sat in his truck for a long time. He had won. He had gotten back the house, and the money, and his own good name. And the man who'd taken them was going to spend years paying for it. And it felt like grief, because it was. You can be completely right and still lose your brother. He'd learned that. He let himself feel it for exactly as long as the drive home, and then he put it in the folder with everything else and closed the cover. Here is what happened next, because you've earned the part where the light comes back. Travis got his house back before Thanksgiving, and the first thing he did was change the locks himself on a Saturday with a drill and a $15 kit from the hardware store. He slid the new brass key onto the chain with his dog tags, where the old, useless one had ridden for 2 years. And when it turned in the deadbolt with a clean, solid sound, he stood on his own porch and let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding since February. The key turned. That was the whole victory, right there in his hand. The key turned. He did not put Rosa and Miguel and the baby out. He'd meant what he said in the hospital. He signed them a real lease, a fair one, in his own name at last. Rent that was honest, and a landlord who fixed the faucet when they called. And they stayed on in the little back rooms of the house while Travis took the front. An odd arrangement that turned into a good one. The baby, whose name was Sophia, learned to walk holding onto Travis's fingers across the living room floor he'd once thought he'd lost. Rosa still sends a photo every year on Sophia's birthday. He keeps them on the refrigerator. He got Bear back too. That was the piece that had hurt worst and quietest. The dog he'd left was Shane, the big goofy shepherd who'd slept at the foot of his bed. Shane had given the dog away when the money got bad, to a family 2 towns over. And when Travis tracked them down expecting a fight, he found decent people who'd loved the animal well, and, when they heard the whole story, drove Bear back themselves and wouldn't take $1. Bear came through the door of the Pine Street house, took 1 circle of the living room to be sure, and lay down in the exact spot by the window where he'd always lain. As if 2 years were nothing. As if home was a thing a good dog simply remembers. Travis sat on the floor next to him, and finally, only then, put his face in the dog's fur and let it all go. Walt still lives across the street with his porch light on, and Travis cuts his grass now along with his own. And on Sunday nights, there's often a soldier and an old veteran on one porch or another, with the game on low, not talking much, which is how men like them say the important things. The town knew, of course. It's the kind of place where everyone always knows, where the diner had opinions and the church had prayers, and a few people crossed the street rather than pick a side between two brothers. Travis never asked anyone to take his. He just went back to work and let the record speak for him. And in a small town, the record always gets around. People saw who had served and who had stolen, and they drew their own quiet conclusions. And in a town that size, that was its own kind of sentence, laid on top of all the rest. As for Shane, last Travis heard, he was still paying, a little off every check, the way a tide takes a beach. And he'd started going to the meetings a man goes to when the machine in his pocket has finally taken everything. Travis hadn't spoken to him. He didn't know if he ever would. He'd told Walt once, when Walt asked if he'd ever forgive his brother, that he wasn't sure forgiveness was even the right word, that some things you don't forgive so much as set down because they're too heavy to carry and you've got a life to walk into. I don't hate him, Travis had said. I just don't trust him. And I've learned those aren't the same thing. Then he'd gone home to a house that was his, with a dog by the window and a baby learning to walk down the hall. And he'd locked the door with a key that turned. He kept the folder. It sits on a shelf in the hall closet. 4 months of a man's ruin and his patient climb back out. And every page of it is true. He doesn't open it. He just likes knowing it's there. Proof that when the ground tilted, he didn't fall. That a quiet man with a paper trail can beat a loud man with a lie every single time. And that the strongest thing you can do when someone takes everything is to keep your voice down, keep your record straight, and walk it all into the light. If this one got to you, do me a favor and stay a second longer. Tell me in the comments what you'd have done in that parking lot, holding your own forged name. Could you have kept your voice down? Or would you have driven straight to your brother's door? And where are you all listening from tonight? What state? What age? I read every one, and I'm always curious who's out there in the dark with me. Take care of the people who show up straight for you. Lock your door, and I'll see you in the next one.